Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Wolftooth, Blood and Iron, out December 3rd on Napalm Records. The album has 9 tracks, 49 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are an American doom metal band. Now, this record offers a lot of different stories, and this has a very positive impact in the overall design of the record. Because from a sound and structure perspective, the album is very balanced, is very cohesive. There's a few nuances here and there, but there's not many, which allows the album to stay very connected across all 9 tracks. So having different stories and telling them from a different perspective really helps define the album, gives each song its own fingerprint, allows the record on one hand to be very consistent, but on the other hand to offer some diversity so it doesn't stay repetitive across any single portion of its duration. It's an album that offers you a road. The road ahead is clear, there's no deviations, but it doesn't become monotonous. It feels fresh at every single turn. Think about this album as you would of a lake. You throw a stone in it, it creates ripples. Those ripples change the surface of the lake, but they do not change the size of the lake. That's exactly how this album is built. As far as the soundscape is concerned, this is a doom metal album, so that is the backdrop of the record as far as sound goes. But think about two bands. Think about Chemist and think about Black Sabbath. This record is a little bit in between. It takes some from one and it takes a little bit from the other. I really like the old school approach all around. The new elements impact the execution of the record, but they do not impact the overall soundscape that the album has. This album sounds super dated, like it was released in the 70s or something. It just has an old atmosphere to it, but it's an atmosphere that's necessary for two reasons. It's necessary for a band that plays this sort of sound, that has this sort of approach, and it's also needed because of the stories that are being told are old myths, old legends. So the soundscape helps define those stories, it helps bring them to life because everything feels dated. If this record sounded modern, if it sounded polished, if it sounded clean, it would be completely disconnected from what it's trying to do lyrically, and that would have a negative impact all around. The album would just not be the same. So I love this old school style. It just fits the band perfectly, and it fits this album to a T. Now, within the soundscape, there are 3 elements that I feel like very important, but they have different roles throughout this album, and that is the drums, bass, and guitars. The drums are very consistent, very balanced from beginning to end. They have this role of filling in the gaps, creating the backdrop, creating the foundation for the overall soundscape. Even when they get heavier, they don't jump into the forefront. There's no single song on this album that you feel like the drums are overshadowing one of the other elements. On the other hand, they sit always in the back, they're always in the background, creating that substance, creating those layers, that depth of sound that's so important for this record, but never really overstepping its boundaries. The bass is phenomenal. I love the bass tone. I was actually pretty worried about how the bass was going to come across, because on an album that sounds like this, sometimes the bass feels a little gritty, or in the mix it comes across a little bit gritty, and that hurts the overall experience that you're going to get out of the guitars because it damages what they're trying to do. It damages the drive they could have on an album. I wanted the bass to not fall into what the drums are doing and also not fall into what the guitars are trying to achieve. I really wanted the bass sound to be somewhere in between, and that's exactly what you're going to get on this record. Sometimes the bass helps the drums by creating depth, by creating heaviness, by grounding the album. Sometimes the bass helps define what the guitars are going to do. So this walking the fine line between those two elements, helping one, helping the other, really suits the bass well, and it really suits the album all around. Now, the guitars felt a little bit perhaps more diverse. I mean, they're super fuzzy, and that is something that stays consistent from beginning to the end. It doesn't matter if the sound is a little bit more driven, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit more chunky, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit more methodic. The fuzziness of the guitars is something that you're going to have to live with throughout, but it has so much character, is so much a part of the overall soundscape and the essence of this band. The part that I like, the diversity that I like as far as the guitars are concerned, is that you're not just going to get doom riffs. You're going to get some thrashy riffs, you're going to get some pure rock and roll riffs, and that adds those nuances that are so important so an album doesn't become repetitive. The other aspect of diversity as far as guitars are concerned is that the solos come a little bit outside the box. The fuzziness that you get in the overall consistency of the sound is not present when it comes to the solos. The solos are very clear, very well defined. They really jump off the tracks, allowing the songs to get a little bit brighter, to gain a little bit more momentum, to feel a little bit bigger. That difference is so important because they don't get lost within the overall sound that the songs have. They really feel like they have their own place within the tracks. Now, the vocals are phenomenal. When you're telling stories, sometimes more important than a great story is a great storyteller, and this record has a phenomenal storyteller. The clean vocals are outstanding. They really help enforce the essence of the songs, the stories that they're being told. It gives nuances to what is happening within these stories. I really fell in love with the vocals. I really like the approach all around, and really helps create a stronger album, an album that has a lot more to give. And all around, this is a phenomenal record. When you look at the old school mixing, that old school sound, almost like a Black Sabbath pure sound to it, then you look at how good the vocals are, the drums, what they're doing, the consistency, the bass, walking that fine line in between, the guitars, the fuzziness of the sound. Everything that this album has to offer really works well with the other pieces that it has around. It's an album that doesn't have any loose ends, and because of that, becomes a very strong Doom record all around. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Ahab. This is the opening track on the album, a song that has the guitars that drive the experience, they drive the sound. The vocals provide some melodic overtones to how the overall song feels and how it comes across. The chorus slows down. I felt like the verses on this track had a little bit more momentum, like you were chasing Moby Dick. It felt that like they had movement. But when it got into the chorus kind of slowed things down. It became perhaps a little bit more introspective. Also, bringing some layers into the vocals and the chorus is something that you're going to see throughout this record that works really well, because it creates volume, it creates a sense of intensity, but it does not change the overall dynamic of the track. It doesn't make the song feel heavier, it just makes it feel more intense. This track has great depth of sound. The drums really help with that, and so does the bass. Vocally, it's a song that just gains power, that feels like it gains life with every single note, with every single word, and that's really important. In the second half of the song, the track almost feels like it picks up momentum. It's almost like the wind is blowing through the sails, and the ship is traveling a lot faster than what it was before. And then it finishes off in an atmospheric downturn. Really interesting song that brings the story to life with the dynamics that it creates within it. Next, you have Blood and Iron. The marching war drums at the beginning are phenomenal because it sets the mood for the song. It really helps the atmosphere of the track, and it helps the story that's going to be told within the track itself. The sound and atmosphere become one. It's really hard to separate them, and that opening really helps that. The fuzzy guitars really become chunky at times, and that fuzziness becomes a lot bigger. It spreads out, becomes wider, and allows the song to have a lot more volume. The bass behind it helps build that volume. It adds upon it. The chorus is very melodic. I really felt like this was a track that had a very melodic tone, more so vocally than it did musically. The heavy drums behind that chorus give the song so much substance. So what you're getting on the verses is the guitars and bass creating that volume. And then when you get to the chorus, you have the drums and the vocals creating that volume. Really interesting. The dynamics between those elements allow the verses and chorus to feel slightly different while creating the same intensity all around. The song feels dynamic, it feels fluid because of that, and it feels impactful. The second half of the track feels perhaps a little bit more direct, a little bit more to the point. It just leads you into a solo that just breaks out. The solo is awesome. It has a different vibe from the rest of the track. It brings in light that's perhaps needed for a song that at times feels like it's walking towards darkness. And then it goes back into that fuzzy guitar sound that drives the experience all the way to the end. Last but not least, we have Winter White, a more rocking song. This is more of a rock track with some doom nuances around it, but overall it just really feels like a pure rock song with some Black Sabbath vibes in it. Musically and actually vocally, I really felt like this is a track that if you close your eyes, you could really feel like you're listening to a Black Sabbath song. It has a lot of those same elements coming across. It's still doomy, but it has that rock vibe that drives the experience. The chorus dives a little bit deeper into the sound itself, and into the atmosphere. The verses lift up the track. That's the nuances, that's the ebbs and flows that this song has to offer. But the guitars and vocals are the two backbones of this track. The guitars drive the song, are the motor of the song, while the vocals dictate the direction that the song takes. Phenomenal track all around. This is it. Wolftooth, Blood and Iron, out December 3rd on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.